Someone who just appeared out of nowhere and said they love the movement is Nate, who's doing all the sound for us. Thank you so much. And of course, Heather of 2640, who's really given us a huge hand. Thank you so much, both of you. So our next guest is from the Baltimore B-Note, and she has a very special presentation for you here today. She's a friend of mine, also one of my heroes. You'll hear that a lot. Remember when I said before that you can't go to the Federal Reserve and sit in on a meeting and give your suggestions? What if you could with the local currency? Because every Wednesday at Breathe Books, you can. You can go to the local B-Note meeting and you can pitch your ideas, as crazy as they may sound. You can learn about local currency, you can learn about local supply chains, you can learn about completing supply chains from the farms out to the county to the restaurant that you love to eat at. And you can work with them to make those things exist way more resiliently than in normal capitalism. Way more resiliently than a Walmart-based system where everything's coming in from God knows where. With that, I'm going to turn over to Julie Gouldener.
Hello. I'm very excited to be here. I didn't think I was going to make it. I've been sick all week. And this is my first, I guess, debut with other living beings outside my home, so I'm very excited. That also means that I woke up this morning and found that I'm losing my voice. So it's very bad timing. I'm going to do my best, and let's just hope that I can make it through the 20 minutes. If not, we'll have to improvise. So I just wanted to find out, first of all, how many people here, raise your hand if you actually know that Baltimore has a local currency, a local money. Okay, cool, great. I kind of figured that would be the case. So when I was thinking about preparing to come here today, you know, we have information at a table over here. We have brochures that answer the questions. If you don't know about Baltimore's local money and you'd like to know more, you can go to the table and find out all the basics of the system administration. But for those of you who already know about it, I thought it might be a little bit more interesting to talk about why I'm doing this and what this means to me and why I think this field is so important. So that's what I wanted to focus on today. And I hope Katie is with me. She's going to pass around some B-Notes so that if you haven't had a chance to actually look at them and touch them, you can do that. But the name of my talk, it's something that I call Economics is Not Actually Boring at All, and Why Economic Alternatives are Totally Awesome and will be game changers for the entire world. I really believe that. And I'll get into why. So I've been thinking a lot about how I ended up here, how I ended up working with a local currency system, and what's driving me to do it and why it's so important. And it's not really an obvious fit for me. I don't have an economics background. I'm not a local currency expert, although I've definitely learned a lot over the last couple of years of being involved with this project. I've actually been really afraid of anything math-related for most of my life, and pretty intimidated by economics, actually. I didn't really understand it. And I didn't really try to understand it. You know, I thought there's very smart people who are running these systems, they know more than me. I sensed that something was off about the way the world is, but I didn't tie it to economics at all, and I just figured, well, it's better if I just stay out of it. And I did stay out of it for a really long time. I worked as a community organizer, I've been a visual artist, I've been involved in activism for over 10 years. Mostly in environmental issues, primarily climate change. But I've also worked on clean energy, homeless issues, immigrant rights, worker rights, anti-poverty campaigns, fair trade issues. I mean, pretty much you name it, I've been to the rally, I've locked myself to something, I've hung the banner. But you know, when I first started doing these things, I was really kind of full of steam and really wanted to get my voice out there. I wanted people to hear me, you know, hear my message. And the longer that I was involved with this type of thing, the more I started listening more and asking more questions. And I found that very often people really agreed with the things that I was fighting for. In fact, even sometimes the corporations that I was fighting, not always, but sometimes I found that most people generally agree and yet didn't find that it was realistic to change and that things still weren't changing. And I really began to start exploring, well, why is this? If people are generally and overwhelmingly in agreement that things are off and they want to see things change and they're not changing, why are they not changing? And so as I started listening and asking questions, I found that the answer to almost any question that I would come up with that about something I didn't like or something that I thought could be changed, it all kind of got back to money. So, I mean, any question, like why is someone working for this job that they absolutely hate for a corporation that is doing awful things in their community? Or why is the corporation making these decisions to pollute the community's river? Or, you know, why are toxic products being sold? Or why don't people spend more time with their family? Or why are they not doing what they love? It's all about money. It all comes back to money. So I really began to think about money and what it is. For the first time in my adult life, I was curious about the money system and how it works. And it was kind of like a fish beginning to explore the nature of water for the first time. It's just kind of there, and I just assume that things are just kind of the way they are. But that's not true. They haven't always been this way. And in fact, there's many, many places where money systems look and behave very differently. And I was amazed to find this out. So as I'm exploring, you know, these concepts of money, one of the things I heard a lot from people I know were like, oh, Julie, but money is just green energy. You know, the money's not bad, it's just green energy, and it all depends on your consciousness and how you use it. And, you know, to an extent, that's true as far as it goes. Money is just paper or whatever it is, you know, shells or rocks or whatever the society deems money to be. But to ignore the fact that there are rules of engagement that people unconsciously accept about these pieces of paper, and that the system itself is set up to make some outcomes much more likely than others, is, I think, to miss something very, very important. You know, it would kind of be like saying, oh, but, you know, Monopoly, it's just a game. And it is. It's just, you know, a piece of cardboard. But I think that anyone who's ever played Monopoly knows that the rules of engagement of the game make people behave like total assholes when they might not otherwise do that. I've never seen people that I know behave so badly. And I had the very strange experience as a kid, and I remember this very clearly, because the rules are accepted, you know, people were like, oh, this is great, you know, you're doing something that's literally making your friend cry, and that's fine, but if I tried to like change the rules or like help them, and I always tried to change the rules, I tried to lend people money or just give them money or not make them pay rent or all this stuff, and they would get really mad. You know, this actually happened, by the way. I'll never forget it. Someone yelled at me, told me to stop cooperating, which I thought was very interesting. So can I deduce from this experience that I played Monopoly with the meanest people in the entire world? I could deduce that, but really it seems more likely to me that the rules of the game are producing a certain type of behavior. So our current economic system, as many of you already know, is by any measure just wildly out of balance. And this is just one chart. I'm sure that many of you have actually already seen this. It shows wealth distribution. So the middle bar is what Americans think, how Americans think wealth actually is distributed, and the yellow is like the top 20%, and then it goes on down. And then the bottom is what they would like it to be. And there's a fair amount of difference. People generally want it to be a lot more equitable. And the top bar is what it actually is. And I mean, you can barely even see the bottom two categories. They're like a sliver there. It's just obscene. But this is just one measure, right, of how things are so out of balance. And we've already talked about some of the other ways. You know, every living system is in decline. The planet's becoming increasingly unstable. Worker wages are going down. Our food is making us sick. You know, you already know the issues. We have wars over resources. So again, this begs the question. I mean, so our current system is kind of like Monopoly to me, but it's actually worse. So it would be like if you were playing Monopoly, but one player already had half the money and the hotels and all the things just before you even started, and like some people had nothing, and some people were blindfolded, and some people started the game like an hour later. That would be what our current economic system really is. And so again, there's the question of, are people just greedy, selfish jerks who want to destroy things? And some people are, yes. I would say that exists. But I don't believe that that is the majority, and I believe that that's an aspect that's within all of us, right? We all have the capacity to behave that way. But we also all have the capacity to behave in extremely generous ways. We see examples of this all the time. So that's the question, is like, you know, are we really that bad, or have we set ourselves up with rules of the game that are producing behavior from us that we might not otherwise display? So here's why I think that alternative economic initiatives, kind of like the alternative local currencies, not just paper currency, I'll get into some of the other ones, are really amazing. And I really do think that they can begin to change the world, because they can begin to change the rules of the game that we're actually playing. They can set up things differently. So what can actually happen with a paper currency? That's just one example of an alternative currency, like the B-note. And there's many, many others in use right now throughout the US, and in fact throughout the world. So first and most obvious thing is you can't spend local currency at chain stores. So they're for use at small independent merchants, and they build local wealth. They help support small independent business owners who live and work in your community, and support the main streets, right? And this can have a lot of impact. There have been some studies done recently by several groups, Civic Economics, the New Economics Foundation, that have attempted to capture what can happen when people start spending locally. And it's pretty amazing. For every $100 that's spent at a locally owned business, approximately $73 or more stays right there in the community, continuing to benefit the people who live and work there. And that's as opposed to less than half that would stay in the community if you spend it at a chain store, and sometimes significantly less than half. Another study showed that very small shift in behavior could produce really big results. So in a population of almost 800,000 people, just a 10% shift in people's spending habits from national chains to locally owned stores could create, you know, millions of dollars, 137 million in new economic activity, thousands of new jobs, millions of new wages. So that's pretty significant. And a local currency can actually really begin to multiply and amplify these effects of shopping local. Because if you shop local with Federal Reserve dollars, that's great, and you should do that. Obviously, it can have a huge impact. But if you're using a local currency, then the business owners that you're using them with, they also are in turn thinking about sourcing their supplies locally. And we've seen this happen in Baltimore with the B-note already. So this can create really strong local supply chains where businesses are sourcing as much as possible in raw goods right in the community. And it can also illuminate gaps, which I think is important in two ways. And number one, it can get people to ask the question, what is not being produced right here in Baltimore that could be? And is that an opportunity for a new business and, you know, new jobs in the city? And then there's things that, of course, can't be produced locally. We're not going to be growing coffee beans in Baltimore anytime soon. And that's okay, but it's good to know that. And I think it puts a community in a fundamentally more resilient place if they're exploring these questions and kind of know the answers to that, much more so than a community that's not even thinking about this stuff at all. So changing the rules of the game, I think, need to go far, far beyond what I'm doing with the B-note, far beyond just a paper currency. That's a piece of the puzzle, but it's only a piece. There is a man that I've been reading a lot of his work, and it's pretty amazing. Bernard Littauer. He's a civil engineer, an economist, a professor. He actually is a currency expert. He talked about something that really kind of blew my mind. as a way of categorizing alternative currencies. And it was a way of expressing it I'd never heard before, and I really liked. So there's this concept of yin and yang currencies. So yang currencies typically come from patriarchal societies. They promote competition, and most national currencies, if not all, are considered to be extreme yang, especially the US dollar. Yin currencies, on the other hand, are like time banking or barter networks, where those values are promoting cooperation. They tend to occur in societies where there's more of fair wealth distribution, matrifocal societies, and they're generated by the community. So let's look at a couple specific examples. I wish I could share with you all the examples I found because they're amazing, but there's, this is an example of a yin currency. I'm not even going to try to pronounce it in Japanese, but it translates to caring relationship tickets. So what these do is they pay for any care for elderly that's not covered by the national health insurance. So let's say that there's an elderly man that lives near me who's handicapped. He can't go shopping for himself. So I go shopping for him, I bring his stuff back, I help him make a meal, and I get those credits in my account. They're put in a savings account for me. Then when I get sick and I need care, someone can come and take care of me with the credits that I've earned. Or I can actually send those electronically to a relative who doesn't live near me so someone can take care of my sick or elderly relative. So this is a way of solving a social problem without money. One of the coolest things that Bernard Littauer talked about in reference to the yin and yang currencies is that while patriarchal societies tended to produce yang currencies, the matrifocal societies did not produce monopoly of yin currencies. In fact, most matrifocal societies created both yin and yang. So they created a balance of the two, which is interesting because I think we need a lot more of that balance. And there's a current example of this in Bali where they actually have a dual currency system running. So they have the conventional national currency, but they also have a time currency where the unit is like a block of 3 hours. And whenever they undertake a community project, they actually have a budget that includes line items for both currencies, in the national currency and in time. So, I can only talk about a few examples of what can happen when a community begins to kind of change the rules of the game in terms of the economic system. I wish I could share all of them with you, but there's so many, and I really challenge you to go home and do some research on your own. And I challenge you to do that and then not be incredibly inspired and feel engaged. So if you've always been turned off by economics, I really encourage you to look into it. I think you'll like what you see. The rules of the game are changing, and we're changing them. And you'll like it. It's starting to be a better game. It's not the old Monopoly anymore. And if you're already engaged with these ideas, get more engaged. We need to push the rule changes faster and harder. And hopefully in time we can create a game that we actually want to play. So thank you so much.